Hi, I'm Kathryn Delaney, and today's video is called What's in That Little Bottle? I am a clinically trained herbalist, nutritionist, and aromatherapist, and today's video was inspired by one of our recent workshops on intensive medicine making, where a student had asked, "Hey Kat, what is the difference between a flower essence and an essential oil?" I had just been working on this diagram, so today I'm going to present this to you, which is going to explain just a brief summary of the difference between homeopathics, flower essences, and various extractions based on the medium that they're in. You would find this video interesting if you work in the health field, for instance, a health food grocery store in the vitamin department, or even just work in that grocery store and want to know more about the products that are in the supplement and vitamin area of that particular business, as well as if you are in any industry where people use these natural therapeutics and you want to have the ability to guide them in a safe way and how to use them. So what brought me to this path is actually originally aromatherapy, and then subsequently herbalism and flower essences and the range of other things. So if you are interested in learning more about me, I can explain my history and what brought me to really become passionate about different botanical therapeutics. As I said, today is just going to be a brief summary, stepping in to the pool, so to speak, of these different therapeutics and their brief history, how they're made, their concentration levels, what's in them and what's not in them, and just some brief cautions around using them. I'm going to make some videos again in the future that is going to be an individual video on each of these particular therapeutics, so that I can explain how you go about making these therapeutics if you're interested in doing medicine making at home, because that is actually my profession. I am not only a medicine maker, but I also consult on natural products and help people with their diet and a range of other services. Along with that, I also teach workshops, which I had mentioned earlier, inspired me to actually make this diagram for you all. So let's just go ahead and jump in. So what do I have here on this whiteboard behind me? I'm going to explain it as I walk through, but if we can just glance over here at your left, we have homeopathics, which is going to be a subtle form of therapeutic medicine, all the way over to essential oils, which is going to be one of the most concentrated, if not the most concentrated form of botanical medicine that one can use. So I'm going to just walk through each one briefly. If there's any particular one that you are called to know more about, please let me know below. That may inspire a different format in regard to how I lay out this series, but my first and foremost passion was essential oils, and then I've been studying all of these other botanic medicines as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. So if you are walking through the vitamin and supplement department in a natural food store, you may come across something called a homeopathic. They are typically seen in these little vials that resemble the shape and size of a lip balm, but they're very different. They're not a lip balm, they're not a wax substance. They're actually a very diluted substance that was developed in the theory that if we can take a very dilute form of something that would typically be poisonous to us, it can help our body to actually fight against that thing that we come in contact with. Now, one of the most common homeopathics that people use is something called Arnica montana, which is used most commonly for bruising and prior to surgeries to prevent inflammation and things like that. Now, Arnica montana can be taken as a homeopathic that way. It can also be taken in a homeopathic gel form in a similar way. And it can also be used as a topical salve in, say, a CO2 extract. But Arnica montana actually is quite the emetic, will actually make you vomit and get sick if you drink it as a tea. So it's very important to consider the use of the medicine itself, because all herbs are quite different and cannot be used interchangeably. And I am explaining that because, for instance, just because you find Arnica montana in a homeopathic or any other thing in a homeopathic, it does not mean that you can necessarily drink it as a tea. So we see that when we enter into botanical therapeutics, that we can have one form of plant that's extracted in different forms, and in some ways it's a lot more safe for us to use than in others. And that's why I'm stepping into this video to work with you all today. So what's interesting about homeopathics is they are so dilute. Now, you will see different things when you look at these little vials, and they explain how much they've been diluted. And in the homeopathic theory, the more diluted it is, the stronger it is. So you will see things like 6C, 30C, 10X, and different numbers that explain basically the different dilutions that they are and how to use them, because you use various homeopathics for different acute physical conditions. Homeopathics are something that are such a subtle form of therapy that they aren't said to interact with Western medicine pharmaceuticals. So, for instance, if someone is undergoing surgery and taking Arnica montana, it's not going to interfere with any other medication that the person is taking, which is important to consider, because that is not true with other forms of botanical therapies. Now, in the specific video about homeopathics, I'll explain those different dilutions and just briefly how to use them, because I'm not actually certified in that realm of homeopathics, but I am familiar with how they're used and how they've been used, and I do often use them myself personally. So let's step away from homeopathics and go to the next therapeutic, which is flower essences. Now, flower essences are also another form of subtle therapy. We have seen them most commonly in things like the 5-flower formula or the rescue remedy, which both of these remedies are used in moments of shock and trauma to help someone overcome really strong emotional states. And this form of botanical therapy was, interestingly enough, developed by a Western trained medical practitioner that used traditional medicine in his therapies. And he realized that most conditions that people developed that were chronic conditions had some kind of initial domino in the emotional realm. And so he wanted to seek out what was going to prevent that physical illness from actually manifesting. So he went out and developed the 38 what are known Bach flower remedies, and that was Edward Bach from the England, European area. So that's really interesting. And flower essences, which I pointed out to my student a couple months ago, are very different than essential oils. They are created in such a way that someone would take a crystal bowl out into nature around 10 a.m. and be in a very quiet, peaceful state, fill that vessel with spring water, and then collect each perfectly opened flower without touching it themselves with their hands. So they are going to take tools like tweezers and scissors that have been sterilized and collect each individual blossom and place it on that water, and then once that water is covered with flower blossoms in that way, it's set out in the sun so that the sun can infuse that water with the energy of the flower blossom itself. That then is strained and added to equal parts of brandy to create what's called a mother essence. That mother essence has 1 drop taken out of it, put into a vessel with 99 drops of other spring water, and then that is considered a stock bottle that then is sold in the store. So you can see that that's already diluted quite a bit more just to be able to be sold to you. And then to make a dosage bottle, 4 drops of that stock essence are added to more spring water for someone to take 4 drops 4 times a day. So it's also another very subtle therapy, and it's something that people use for different emotional states that they can get stuck in that prevent them from being able to apply themselves in life in their full light and in their full heart, because emotional things can bring these hang-ups for us. And in this way, the flowers themselves can actually help people change their vibration. And this is a therapeutic that has been used for many decades and has been shown to be quite effective for people. Again, flower essences don't negatively interact with any other therapeutic that one would be taking, because it's such a subtle form of therapy. Now, they also are basically really diluted water and with a little bit of brandy in them, so that they might have a very slight taste, but they don't have any fragrance or aromatic similar to the plant itself. They literally are just the essence of the flower. Now, they are also, as I said, really subtle in therapies. And it's more of a therapeutic for our emotional well-being that can help our physical states from manifesting. Now, we go from the flower essence to one of our most basic forms of tea, or basic forms of therapy, which is beverage tea. And in beverage tea, we have typically, a little satchel of tea that has typically a teaspoon's worth of plant matter in it. And you can see, perhaps, if you can see through the semi-translucent nature of this tea bag, there's not a lot of plant matter in this little tea bag. And this is put in 8 ounces of water, and it's really just a beverage tea. It's something to sip on. Now, this will have anything that you can get that's basically a water extract. So now we're starting to enter into not subtle therapies, but more extractions. And once we enter into the extractions of botanicals, we're looking at what that extract can actually pull out of the menstruum that we're using to extract the plant material in. And that's based primarily on the polarity of the menstruum itself, but can also be influenced by other factors such as the pH or the temperature and other factors such as those, which we can go into in further videos. I'm trying to make this brief, and I realize it will likely be a decent length of a video. But again, you're going to get water-soluble things out of this plant matter, which means you're going to get minerals and you're going to get water-soluble vitamins. Now we go from this traditional beverage tea, we're going to step up in concentration and have a standard tea infusion, which in herbal medicine would be more of a therapeutic dose of tea. And in this situation, we're actually looking at an extraction ratio. And in this situation, we have an extraction ratio of 1 to 30, which means that we're going to have basically 1 ounce of plant material by weight to 30 parts of volume of menstruum. In this case of the standard tea infusion, again, it's going to be water. So we are going to be extracting water-soluble compounds out of this plant material. Granted, polarity is a continuum, so we will get some oil-soluble constituents, we'll get a little bit of the aromatics of it, we'll get different constituents, but we'll pull mostly the water-soluble constituents because water is more polar, highly polar, and it's going to extract constituents that are attracted to that menstruum. In this situation, you would, of course, have to look out for different health considerations because it's more of a therapeutic dose of tea. So if you do have a health condition, you want to look at the different herbs that you're going to be using, because what's going on with you chronically could be influenced by just the daily beverage that you're drinking or a daily therapeutic tea, particularly if it's stimulating or blood thinning or something in that realm. Now, then we're going to jump over to oil infusions. Now, oil infusions are a little bit more concentrated than a standard tea infusion. So typically in an oil infusion, you're either going to make it at an extraction ratio of 1 to 20 or 1 to 10. And that's going to be based on the actual matrix and density of the plant material that you're working with. So for instance, if we look at calendula, this is 1 ounce. This is 28 grams of plant material. This, coincidentally enough, is 30 grams, again, of plant material. So you can see I have denser herbs in this bottle, whereas in this one, the calendula is very fluffy. So if I made this at a 1 to 5, for instance, 1 part calendula to 5 parts oil, I would lose a lot of my oil to the actual plant material itself. So we typically make an oil infusion in a 1 to 20 if it's really fluffy, or 1 to 10 if it's something more dense like a root or bark or something that's not going to absorb as much of that oil. Now consider in an oil infusion, we're going to extract lipid-soluble constituents and constituents that are attracted to a low polarity because oil is nonpolar. So we'll be able to extract, different colorants, for instance, that are attracted to oil. And in this situation, we see that, for instance, alkanet root will extract its beautiful red color into an oil, but it will not, but in comparison, hibiscus, which we see a really deep red color in water because that red color in hibiscus that's natural is actually more soluble in water, the hibiscus won't transfer that color over to oil. So now we start to see that the oil or the water, whatever menstruum we're using to extract that plant, is going to only extract things that are highly attracted to that menstruum because of polarity. And so that is really what affects our medicine making, as well as which products we use for different things based on which constituents we're actually wanting to have in our body or use topically on our skin. Now consider the next step up from an oil infusion, which is 1 to 20 or 1 to 10, we have honey extractions or vinegar extractions. And these, because they are a little different as far as absorbability, we typically do these in volume to volume, and we'll do 1 part of the plant material or the blend of different plants to 2 parts of the actual menstruum that we're extracting with, so that the plant material is basically covered with twice the amount of volume that the plant material takes up itself. So in this instance, we can see that we go from a 1 to 30 to a 1 to 20 to a 1 to 2, and now we're starting to get a lot more concentrated as far as our extractions and menstruums go. Now let's go to just a traditional tincture, and these could actually be swapped, to be quite honest. But a traditional tincture, if you look at it in the store, you'll see very different numbers depending on the bottle that you are looking at. And that's because the medicine maker is tailoring the menstruum based on the constituents that they're trying to extract. And traditional tinctures are made by combining a different percentage of water and alcohol because, as I had kind of touched on earlier, water or high polarity, or water which is high in polarity, will extract constituents that are attracted to high polar, that are highly polar and attracted to water. It'll attract mostly minerals and water-soluble vitamins. And if you go into the other end and do tincture that's high in alcohol, for instance, something that's 60% or 70% or 80%, it's going to extract more lipid-loving constituents because those are lower in polarity, and higher alcohol is going to be lower in polarity. So you'll see on different bottles that they will be extracted in, say, a 50% solution, or a 40% solution, or a 70% solution, or an 80% solution. And that's all dependent on the actual area within that spectrum of polarity of constituents that are in that plant that they want to extract. So they're basically trying to pull them into a particular zone. Now, in that instance, not only do we see this percentage around water and alcohol being manipulated to extract particular things, we also see the extraction ratio. And so in tinctures, you'll also see different things. You'll see a 1:2 extraction or a 1:5 extraction. And that will be primarily based on the machinery that the company actually has, how high-end they are, as well as, you know, their ability to actually press that material to get a more concentrated extract, or if they actually want to make a 1:1 extract, which is only really possible in, say, a percolated tincture as opposed to a macerated tincture. And we can go more into that in the actual class that details how to make medicinal therapeutic tinctures at home. Now, from the traditional tincture, we're going to go a next step up because these are still all diluted, right? From this tincture, if we're doing a 1:5, we have 1 part plant material to 5 parts menstruum. So we're diluting that into a bigger volume that we're actually then able to work with. So we're still diluting things all the way over on this left side from just the raw plant material. So when you go into a supplement area of a natural food store, you'll also find tablets and supplements, and those can have variant different things inside of them. Some of them just have the plant itself that's crushed up and packed into a capsule. So in that instance, for example, we would have like lavender, and the buds would be collected and they'd be powdered and they'd be stuffed into a capsule. And when you have a capsule, you're going to be getting everything that's in that plant. You're going to be getting all the vitamins, all the aromatics, all the fiber, everything. It's as if I just like took this bud and ate it, and I'm eating it, and I get the whole body of the plant, which is different than if I extract this in water, which I'm going to get mostly water-soluble constituents, right? Or if I extract this in oil, which I'm going to get a lot of oil-soluble constituents. Lavender's intense to eat, just saying. Enough of that. So the raw plant, you're going to get everything, whereas every other extract, you're only going to get what that menstruum can grab from that plant because of the polarity of that plant. Now from the raw plant material, now we're going to start getting more concentrated. So now we have like a 1:1 extract. So that means we basically have all of that plant material in this equal amount of menstruum. And so it's as if every single little microgram of that extract is the same as having the plant because it's been completely put in. Like there's no room, for anything else, so to speak. It's not a 1:2, for instance, where there's like another 50% that's been made into something else. Get this thing off my screen. Get this thing off my screen. Sorry for the distractions. So then we can step up to a 2:1 extract, which means that we've somehow packed 2 parts of plant material into 1 part. So we've like now condensed it and now made it even more concentrated than the plant material itself. But now we're looking at, again, what are you extracting? Because you've got to be leaving something out of that end product. So it's going to be tailored to something because it's not a whole plant, right? So let's go from that 2:1 extract to a CO2 extract. So in a CO2 extraction process, you have CO2, which we know to be a gas that's pressurized to become a liquid. And then that is used as an extraction menstruum for the plant. The pressure is removed, and then they basically have this oily, waxy, lipid-rich substance. But it is waxy. And we see this in industries such as the hemp industry or the cannabis industry, or even in some of the aromatherapy industries, and also in some of the supplement industries, particularly for things that are oil-soluble vitamins or have high aromatics that you want to extract with CO2 at a lower temperature, because a lot of the more delicate constituents within essential oils can be damaged through the common process of steam distillation, which we'll get to in a second. Now, when we talk about CO2 extracts, it's arguable of whether or not it's equal in quality and in character to an essential oil, because as I had said, a CO2 extract is waxy. It's when you take the pressure off of CO2, there's a whole range of different lipid-loving materials in there, and particularly in the CBD realm or in the cannabis realm, a lot of times that product is washed off. And I can say this because I've been a developer for a CBD product industry, and there's a range of different percentages of the endocannabinoids that you can get in that product based on whether or not they clean it up. So for instance, you can get a 4% product, you can get a 10% product, or you can get a 56% product, and the product I'm talking to about here is that endocannabinoid that they're tailoring to extract out of that plant material. Now, one might be led to ask, well, if it's 4%, what's the other 96%? And if it's 10%, what's the other 90%? Or the other 44%, right? If it's a 56%. And that is different oils and waxes that are lipid-loving and attracted to that CO2 extraction medium. Now, you're going to get and see a lot of that in products that you want to be oil-based supplements. So you see that in like turmeric, where the constituent that you're trying to extract out of it is actually oil-loving, and so you're using that CO2 to extract that substance and make it higher in concentration than it would have been if you just ate a turmeric root on its own. Now, when we look at an essential oil process, now we're looking at one of the most, if not the most concentrated form of botanical therapeutic that we could actually work with. Essential oils, if you aren't familiar, are typically made through the process of either steam distillation or cold pressing, which is a mechanical extraction process. Now, cold pressing is done traditionally for citrus fruits because it's in the essential oil is actually like in the rind, in the peel of the fruit itself. And so just to show you all, don't try this at home, or do try this at home, but do so in a careful place. So as I said, the essential oils are in the rind of the fruit. Now, essential oils are known to be volatile substances, which means that if I drop an essential oil on a sheet of paper, it will dissipate and be volatile. It'll dissipate into the air, much like alcohol will, because it's such a small molecule. Now, because of that, they're also highly flammable, which means that there are certain cautions that have to take place. Now, in comparison, right, that's a citrus fruit, and I can show the essential oil in a citrus fruit because I can very easily extract it through a mechanical expression. Most essential oils are actually made through the process of steam distillation. Now, in the process of steam distillation, you have a heat source, you have, oops, that's not what that flask looks like. You have a boiling flask which has water in it, which is boiling and creating steam. You have a biomass flask which has the plant material in it, so that then this coil heats up the water to boiling to create steam, which then passes through all of this plant material. Then you have a condenser arm where the steam can travel. This drops down into a tube that has a condenser coil around it. And I'm drawing a glass distiller. There's also copper distillers and stainless steel distillers that one can also fashion and buy. But this is the one that I use for my teaching purposes. So basically what goes on here is you have a heat source, it creates boiling water, it creates steam which passes through this plant material. Let's say it's lavender, this would be stuffed into this vessel. the steam breaks open all the cells in the plant matter itself, and then the aromatics and the essential oils actually travel on that steam. So they're teeny, teeny, tiny little molecules. That gets carried over here through this condensing arm over here, and there's this tube that's wrapped around this coil that basically is having ice water funneled into it so that that steam is getting cooled back into being a liquid. And then what you have in here is a combination of hydrosol, which is that condensed water vapor and is the water that basically carried the essential oils. And then you have the essential oils. Now, in comparison, for instance, when I've taught my classes on distillation, we can use in my distiller 2 liters of plant material and run the distiller for 8 hours and get, about 6 to 8 ounces of hydrosol and get 5 milliliters. Yes, that's 1/6 of an ounce of essential oil. So it takes a lot of plant matter to create an essential oil. It takes, on average, for most plants, around 200 pounds of plant material to create 16 fluid ounces of actual essential oil. And consider that the hydrosol, right, we just saw that the essential oil is flammable and volatile. The hydrosol is going to be a water component, so it is not flammable, and it is a lot more safe and also is a really concentrated form of that botanical therapeutic. I'm trying to introduce again how people can use hydrosols, and I will add that into the hydrosol section if you're interested in taking that portion of the class and learning more about hydrosols. Now, when we look at this extraction process, this is a chemistry process, which is, it can be arguable that a beverage tea or a standard tea infusion is also a chemistry process, but they're very different scales of medicine making, and what you're getting here in this tea is going to be, minerals and water-soluble vitamins. Right? So it's a beverage tea that can bring you something therapeutically. Now, when we jump over here to an essential oil, we're not getting any water-soluble vitamins in an essential oil. We're not getting any oil-soluble vitamins in an essential oil because those molecules are far too big to actually travel on a water molecule of steam. And what we are getting in comparison is terpenes and monoterpenes, which are not necessarily a supplement in nature. They're actually really high concentrations of substances that need to be diluted properly in order to be used properly. As I had mentioned before, one of my first passions in introducing myself into the field of herbal medicine is in the realm of essential oils. So if you're looking for more information on how to use essential oils safely, you can check out my app, which is called the Esenta Aromaticum app. It's available for Apple iPhone systems. I also teach classes, so let me know that you're interested in those classes, and I will keep you in the loop as far as when those classes will be developed to be taken online. I also develop products, have my own range of different body care products and natural therapeutics, which you can find on my Etsy page, Roots of Alchemy, and I also make dream catchers and astrological orbs that you can find on my website, Roots of Alchemy. Again, I hope this video was useful to you. If you have particular interests in anything specifically that you'd like to learn more about, I'm considering which end of the scale I'd like to start on first. So if you have a preference, if I start on homeopathics and work to the right, or if I start on essential oils and work our way to the left, I am willing and interested in doing either. Of course, my first passion is essential oils, so I'm a little bit partial to that, and I think it's really important for people to know how to use them safely. Now, what's so interesting about essential oils, and I will digress because I was about to just end my video, but I want to just add this piece in really quickly, is that when we're looking at a tea, right, we're drinking, as I said, water-soluble constituents. And we're typically going to be doing something that affects us physically, and it may affect us a little bit emotionally and spiritually as well, because we're nurturing ourselves on a very basic level. Now, when we're going to an oil infusion or honey vinegar extraction, we're making medicine typically. You know, we're making salves, or we're making fire ciders, things like that people are going to use therapeutically. Same with a traditional tincture. We're using this thing therapeutically. We're using it medicinally for some help with some either emotional or physical ailment that we're dealing with. Now, when we go into the realm of essential oils, what's so interesting about them is that they can affect us on a variety of different levels. We can smell them, and they go into our bloodstream just by breathing them in. They can affect our spirit, our emotions, our physical body, and our skin topically. So they're a medicine that has a wide range of uses. But when we consider just how concentrated they are, let's look at, for instance, 200 pounds of plant material makes 16 fluid ounces of essential oil. You can say, yeah, that's a lot, but it's really hard to conceive of what that actually looks like, what that actually means. Okay, so when I teach people, I'll often reference rosemary because we, for instance, eat rosemary in a lot of our foods, and it's considered GRAS by the FDA, which is an acronym meaning generally regarded as safe for consumption. Because historically, people have eaten rosemary and used it for seasoning, and no one has died, right? And that's the standard that the FDA uses for creating something as GRAS, or designating it as GRAS, because they specifically state that if something is designated as GRAS, that's considered safe for internal use as a food, but not as a supplement or as a medication, because when we take something as a food, we traditionally eat a lot less of it than we do if we are going to be taking it therapeutically. Case in point, beverage tea, right? So when we consider that and look at rosemary, it takes about 56 grams, which is just short of 2 weighted ounces of rosemary plant matter to create, 5 drops of essential oil. Okay, so that's roughly visually about this much, this full of a bottle of rosemary leaf that's put through the process of steam distillation to create 5 drops of essential oil. Now, with that same amount of plant material, you can make 67 cups of regular tea. Okay. You can make 6 jars of standard infusion. Most people, when they season their potatoes or their chicken with rosemary, use about a tablespoon or less. In my calculations, I averaged a tablespoon, so you could make 22 dishes of rosemary potatoes or rosemary chicken. You could make 111 milliliters of tincture, which means almost 4 1-ounce bottles of tincture, right? That's made at a 1-to-3 dilution or extraction ratio. Or you could have 5 drops of essential oil. So that's a big range as far as like what you can use and what you're getting out of it based on how you're extracting it. And consider, for instance, if you're drinking just straight rosemary tea and you are, halfway through the glass and you decide it really isn't what you want to drink and your body gives you feedback, you can stop drinking it and just set it to the side and go on from there. If you're working with a tincture, you can do the same thing. I've actually had friends of mine who have been working with the tincture of rosemary for mental stimulation who have actually experienced some pretty negative side effects, and that's because of the essential oil constituents that are in rosemary. Now consider that rosemary as an essential oil has a caution in using it with people who are epileptics because it can actually trigger seizures. And my friend who is actually an epileptic was using just the tincture therapeutically, internally, to help with mental stimulation, and after 2 days of using 1 to 2 milliliters 3 times a day, he started feeling noise on the wire, so to speak, that he was about to have a seizure. So he decided to stop using the rosemary tincture. Now consider that one could make almost 4 bottles of rosemary tincture with the same amount of plant material that it takes to make 5 drops of essential oil. So when someone starts leaning into the realm of using essential oils internally, which I, as a clinically trained aromatherapist, caution people against doing, they are raising the lever as far as possibly poisoning themselves or having some kind of negative side effect. Because once you put it in your body, you can't take it out, and it's far more concentrated. So there's something that we talk about in herbal medicine that we use to designate a plant. And so it is this process of chewing on the plant or smelling the plant and letting the body tell you, is this plant a food? Is it a medicine? Or is it a poison? Right? And consider that dosage affects that. So one can really harm themselves even when they drink way too much water. So anything that's a food can also be in enough quantity made into a poison. But therapeutics are more delicate in that way because we have to consider someone's constitution, and we also have to consider the energetics of the plant itself and if it's actually useful for that person and which medium the person should be taking it in, so that we can actually get the most use for them based on their condition. Now, if we go into some things like essential oils, we can see why it's so important to dilute them so much. For instance, 6 drops of an essential oil to 1 fluid ounce of carrier oil would be a 1 ounce or a 1% dilution, and that would be considered safe for like topical treatments of the face and for some, kiddos, for instance. But to cover the whole body with a product that has an essential oil in it, you don't want to go above 2% of a concentration of an essential oil in the actual fixed oil. And that would mean a top of 12 drops of the essential oil to 1 fluid ounce, tiny little fluid ounce of fixed oil for whole topical treatment. So it's really important to dilute them properly, because not only is it something that is so concentrated, but your body has to process it. And we process these things with our liver and our kidney, and a lot of times our lifestyle can be as such that it compromises these organs. So we have to be careful with these really concentrated substances. And where I see a lot of people that run into problems with using essential oils, it's because they aren't diluting them properly, or because they're overly exposed to them, or they're using them in a completely wrong way. So if you do have interest in learning more about how to properly use essential oils, check out my app or reach out to me so you can get on a mailing list and I can let you know when I'm having more in-depth classes. I hope you all found this video useful and interesting. If you did, please click like and let me know down below. If you want to contribute to this video making process and help sponsor it in some way, that would be great. You can do so by either Venmoing me or sending me some flow to my rootsofalchemy@gmail through PayPal with a little message about what it is funding for this video, and I will also keep you in the loop for these videos so you can make sure to get them when they're first out. I send you all so much love and so many blessings on your medicine making journey. I send you a good wish, and I will see you again at the next video. Bye for now. Happy blending!